We've all heard this statement that he can build a house in which the whole world can live. That was a statement an astrologer made when he saw Prabhupada's picture. It's an interesting question to ask ourselves. How do you build a house in which the whole world can live? Because it has to accommodate different people and different mentalities. And so one answer that will come is Varnashram, because Varnashram is meant for society. Engage people according to their ashram and their varna, or help them find the right varna and the right ashram. But then the next question comes, how will they be engaged, and what spiritual principles will they be expected to follow? And we'll naturally say, well, if they're Shudras, not many. If they're Vaishyas, a little more. If they're Kshatras, a little more. If they're Brahmins, yes, they should be following the same principles we're following. Okay, that makes sense. But now, let's look at ISKCON today. We have not established Varnashram, but still, we have to engage people according to their natures and their levels of spiritual advancement. And we have a problem in that when people come, they're meant to feel that being initiated is what's most important and most valuable, and in a sense that they're a failure if they don't reach that standard. But within a Varnashram community, that would be more of a Brahminical activity. So how do we deal with this? Now, today, I was talking to some people, and they were very distressed. They'd been in Krishna consciousness for about 3 years. And there were certain things that they were finding it difficult to follow, and they were feeling very, very unhappy because they couldn't really follow them, and they felt like a bit strangled in their life. And they asked what I should do. And I said, follow what you can, the best you can, and as you advance, renunciation will come. And immediately they relaxed, they were happy, like, oh, I don't have to, if I can't follow this, I don't have to just struggle and strain. Of course, we might want to push them, but pushing means encouragement, encouragement means inspiration, inspiration also means knowledge, and then that way they can be inspired to do it on their own. But we have to push and force, it doesn't work. But this phenomena is interesting because we also see that many people come to Krishna consciousness with the desire to follow very strictly, and later on in life realize they can't. And in some cases they leave because they feel if they can't follow everything perfectly, they shouldn't stay. And now we have to ask ourselves the question, why would someone feel that way? And that's the interpretation they're getting by reading Prabhupada's books, but perhaps even more so the interpretation they're getting by hearing classes which recommend following strictly, which classes should. But at the same time, when you're giving a class which is geared towards Brahmins, and everyone else is hearing it, then the other people feel, well, I can't do this, there's no place for me. So I think a lot of the preaching that we've done over the years, and maybe we're still doing in some circles, is not taking into consideration that everyone who comes to Krishna consciousness is not going to be able to follow all these principles, and that's okay, because it is the way it is. And once we make room for all of that, without judgment or without pressurizing them, Prabhu, you've been around for 5 years, when are you going to get initiated? Well, I don't really feel I'm ready. What's wrong? Why? That kind of thing. I've seen people get initiated who were not following the 4 regulative principles consistently over a period of time. They would always slip and fall. But their mentors, their associates were pressuring them, when are you going to get initiated? And they didn't want to admit that they weren't following. So that pressure is unhealthy, because the pressure should come from within. And so people are coming, we see them years later, we think, what's wrong with them? They're not advancing, don't they understand? And the answer is, they understand what they understand, they advance according to how well they can advance. Now, we could look at it upon ourselves and say, perhaps I couldn't inspire them. Perhaps it's my defect. And that may be true in some cases, but often it's no one's defect, it's just the nature of that individual. So if we're going to build a house in which the whole world can live, but the house only has one room, it doesn't work. And I think in many ways that's what's been happening. We have one room and we think everyone's going to live in this one room. And that's not true. So the question is how to build a house in which the whole world can live and how not to build a house in which the whole world can't live. And I think in many ways, the way we're preaching, it's giving a vision of a house that people don't see themselves fitting into, because the standards they're not capable of following those standards. Even initiated devotees later find they're not capable of following all those standards perfectly. So we have to take the reality into consideration. And I think a lot of times we don't really look at that reality, or perhaps we don't accept it, or we're in denial of it. But the fact is, it's a reality. Now, someone may say, but it sounds like what you're saying is you're preaching some kind of compromise. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is a reality. And whether we preach strictly or liberally, the reality is that some people will be able to follow, and some people will be able to follow less, and some even less. But we want to make room for them within devotional service and encourage them according to where they're at, doing what they could do, and not making them feel that there's only really one standard, which is 16 rounds and 4 regulative principles. And if you don't come to that standard and someday take initiation, then basically you're a failure in spiritual life. Well, in one sense you could say that, because we should come to that standard. And if we do come to that standard, we'll go back home, back to Godhead. But it's not going to be that everyone's going to be able to come to that standard soon. It may be only later in life, or the end of life, or maybe not even in this life. But at least if we're engaging them in Krishna consciousness, they're going to make advancement. It's the same on Sankirtan. Prabhupada said if they just touch a book, they'll be benefited. Does that mean they'll become a devotee? Not necessarily, but it means that their spiritual life is benefited. It's obviously we want them to read the book. We want them to chant. We want them to engage in devotional service. But even a little bit is something, and then it accrues over lifetimes. So if that's our philosophy on Sankirtan, it should be our philosophy at the temple. It should be our philosophy everywhere. Everyone is different. Everyone's going to find their place. So the basic idea is we need a strategy of spreading Krishna consciousness where everyone who's interested in spiritual life can feel that they have a place and feel encouraged, not feel judged, not feel minimized if they don't come to a certain standard, but feel comfortable and happy to do what they're doing, because if they do that, then they're going to advance, because they're going to continue the process. And if we push people to the point where they want to give up the process at some point in their life because they feel it's all or nothing, we're not going to have a movement that can expand and accommodate the masses of people or larger numbers of people, as the example has been given of the revolving door. You go in, you come out. So the doors, many people are coming, many people are leaving. So the real task is more difficult to keep people than it is to make people. And therefore, let us meditate on this saying, he can build a house in which the whole world can live. What does that mean? How do we do that? What's the vision to do that? Hare Krishna.